Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Get Your Popcorn. We have another returning guest. Thank you, Dad. So this is our second to last episode of spooky season, which is kind of sad. We've been doing this for 2 months now. And so, yeah, this movie is one of my favorites that you showed me. We watched all the time when I was a kid. So we're doing Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
It's one of my favorite movies, and if you're going to introduce your kids to scary things, to classic monsters and so on, this is a terrific way to do that in a non-threatening, non-scary, non-nightmare-y kind of way.
Yes, it's very, very silly. You showed me, and we listened to all the kinds of Abbott Costello media growing up. So can you tell me a little bit about what brought you to them and then like kind of what you like about them?
Yeah. I started a lot of the sort of old time black and white comedians showed up on CBC television when I was a kid. My suspicion is that CBC was able to get them cheap, so they appeared fairly frequently. And I love the language humor with Abbott and Costello. I mean, the whole who's on first routine just continues to kill me every time I see it. And I used it, I used it in one of my language classes. I taught English for a little while. I would use it in the English class to look at English concepts, and that language is just so sharp, so funny that just was always really really drawn to it. And they've got a number of routines that are incredibly funny, but the Who's on First is the one probably that most people know. But you look at their timing is impeccable. I mean, one of the greatest, tightest comedy teams I think in history.
Yeah, I really like their use of language and stuff too. It's part of, I think, why when I started at least as a kid, when we were watching stuff like this and then steering into finding stand up later, why I think I've always gravitated towards comedians like George Carlin who have like very heavy bits that play with language
Yeah.
specifically. That same style of humor, which I feel like we don't see as much in movies anymore, that like back and forth style of jokes.
Yeah.
It's been
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, again, just talking about them as a team too, they didn't meet until they were both already sort of significant vaudeville stars. I mean, they didn't meet until 1936. And just the chemistry is instant. It has got to be the greatest straight man in comedy history. Like he's just so on top of it, and to see the impact of things he says and does on Costello is just unbelievable. They say I've seen all of these things countless times, and they still continue to crack me up. I continue to marvel at their teamwork.
yeah, it was yeah, I really enjoyed it. It had been a really long time since I had seen, like, probably since being a kid and watching it recently. And I made the mistake of going and looking kind of and doing the research before I watched it, looking at the reviews, and it was like horribly panned by critics, and then coming back and being like, no, I stand by this. I think this is really funny. We'll just go over the casting of the film. We've got Bud Abbott as Chick Young. We got Lou Costello as Wilbur Gray. Lon Chaney Jr. as Lawrence Talbot and the Wolfman. We've got Bela Lugosi as Dracula and Dr. Lejos. We've got Glenn Strange as the monster. Lorna as Sandra Mornay. Jane Agdal as Joan Raymond. Frank Ferguson as Mr. McDougal. Charles Bradstreet as Dr. Stevens, and Vincent Price, who is uncredited as his first role. And he's the Invisible Man.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting too. Bela Lugosi as Dracula. I mean, when you think about it, that sounds like that's the natural decision. Is that it needs to be in a film like this? You're going to want to have Bela Lugosi come in and reprise his part. But that wasn't who the studio wanted to begin with. They wanted Ian Keith to come in and play the monster, play Dracula, and so there was a lot of back and forth, and it wasn't a slam dunk that Lugosi was going to get the gig. I mean, he's great in the film, but it seems bewildering to me that that wasn't the automatic. That they had another actor in mind to start.
This is, he only played Dracula on screen twice,
Yeah.
and this is the second time. and the other one being the 1931 Dracula.
Mhm.
Yet, like his image and his like the way he performs it is still what is completely locked into like everybody's understanding of the character. Pretty much, when people hear Dracula, they picture Bela Lugosi, whether or not they've seen the film or not. This was 100 years old, and he only played the character twice.
Yeah. And it's interesting too. I mean, so multiple people played Dracula, multiple people played the Frankenstein monster. Lon Chaney Jr. is the only person who played the Wolfman in that sort of era, right? And he didn't view the film very favorably at all. He viewed it as diminishing the monsters, making them buffoons, I think was the word he used, in a way that he really ultimately didn't appreciate.
Yeah, I from what I've read, everybody didn't seem to be wanting to make this movie. Both Abbott and Costello were very unhappy on the production. They were really unhappy with the script. They made tons of changes. And they would either not show up or would leave the set during filming.
Yeah, yeah. And I think one of the lines that I've seen from Costello was that, something to the effect of, you can't expect me to do this crap. My 5-year-old could write a better script than this, right? And I think what played into it for them too is that their stand-up routines, the routines we just sort of talked about, the language-driven work isn't very prevalent in this. I mean, they have none of the sort of standard stand-up things we associate with Abbott and Costello, things that they'd worked on, they'd honed on vaudeville and had used in earlier films. None of those things really exist here, and I think it was a little unsettling for them at that level as well.
Yeah, there's like moments of what I would consider to be like their style of comedy, and then there's more sort of a like a he's like going into the 50s style of like a Lucy sort of slapsticky kind of thing going on, particularly with Costello's character as he's
Mhm.
getting as he's finding the monsters before Abbott does. So this film was made on a $790,000 budget. It made $3.2 million at the box office. So in today's monies, that was a $10 million budget with a $42 million payoff. So it was considered to be quite a success because, of course, films at this time are not having, there's no such thing as a wide release. We don't see
Yeah.
that until the other movie you and I did, which was Jaws.
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, most of budget was spent on Abbott and Costello on their salaries, and the film was the third highest grossing Universal film in 1948. So certainly for a film that the stars didn't want to make, but the studio did, it did very well.
Everybody doesn't want to be there, which is I was very surprised when doing research for this film, and that was the case. So at least that doesn't kind of shine through because I think we do see movies where we're like, oh, okay, well we're all here for a paycheck.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and that's I think that's really a great point. I mean, just the level of commitment of both Abbott and Costello, who didn't want to do it throughout the scenes. I mean, it's fantastic. There's no sense at all that they wouldn't have wanted to be there. And the other thing that I learned too, and I'm sure you saw it as well, some of the deep personal troubles that both of them had. I mean, some real sort of lack of confidence on Abbott's part. Suffered from severe epilepsy. I mean, you just have no sense of any of that kind of turmoil and anxiety on the set at all. When you watch the film, it looks effortless on their part, and they were really going through in lots of ways a lot of things.
Yeah, and I mean Bela Lugosi's part too at this point, like he's deep into his drug addiction, um, and alcoholism at this point in the film too, and I don't think that reads at all. And after doing research on him for both Dracula and then when I covered Ed Wood, it makes me so happy to see him on the screen
Yeah,
as the character he loves.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and Chaney was struggling at the time too. He had just come off of Broadway doing Of Mice and Men, and had done very well. And he struggled with alcohol as well through this.
So, like, for reception, this film was really disliked by critics at the time, and then in retrospect has been like re-reviewed by critics, and people review it favorably now. It holds a 85% on Rotten Tomatoes, but that's of course skewed over time for critics. I have a thing called Letterbox. I know you don't have Letterbox.
I don't.
So it's a rating system out of 5. It's got an overall score of 3.6. I gave it 5 out of 5 at the time of reveal. Full disclosure, I did watch this shortly after surgery. Take it with a grain of salt. But at the moment, I gave it a 5 out of 5. And I said, I saw what I saw when I saw it, and I fucking loved it, which is, other than the last bit, a quote from the movie.
Oh, that's hysterical. Well, if I had Letterbox, I would give it, 5 mummies out of 5, even though the mummy's not in the movie. The only other thing that maybe to add is that the concept of Abbott and Costello working with the monsters certainly does predate the film. The guys had talked about the idea. They missed stand up, they missed the vaudeville circuit, and had talked a lot about the idea of maybe going to Broadway and doing something on Broadway. And this concept was something that they had been kicking around. What they couldn't do was kind of free their schedules up enough to make that work. I mean, that would have been a significant, commitment to be on Broadway for an extended period, and they couldn't find time in their schedules to make that work. So the premise, or elements of the premise, that become Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein certainly do predate this, and originally was to draw them back to being in front of a live audience, which they loved.
It's so interesting you say that, because when watching the film, I kept thinking that it looked so much. I mean, largely because it's all shot on like old sound stages, but you could easily do that as a play.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they were also doing their radio show at the time too, right? So it would have been, to give up the weekly radio show and to give up film work in order to focus on Broadway would have been a significant challenge for them, even though that was really where, in lots of ways, their hearts remain.
Right. So let's jump into the plot. So a man named Larry, we open up on a phone call at there's a railway station in Florida. We've got Chick Young, who's working there, and that's played by Abbott. And then we've got Wilbur, who is played by Costello, and they're working as baggage clerks at this train station. And Wilbur picks up the phone and he receives a call, and it's Mr. Talbot warning him of a shipment that's about to arrive from McDougal's House of Horrors. And he's trying to warn him that there's something in the box that they cannot allow this to be delivered. And as he's speaking to him on the phone, we see the moon rise. Mr. Talbot changes into the Wolfman, and Wilbur thinks it's a prank. And I'm just going to read out a little bit of dialogue because this is kind of sets up the kind of the tone of what they speak. Wilbur says, Mr. McDougal, will you stop gargling with your throat? And the growling continues. Hey, you're going to have to get your dog away from the phone. I can't hear what you're saying. There's more growling. You're awfully silly to call me like this from London just to let your dog talk to me. So that's kind of the style in which they are, or at least his character interacts.
It's interesting. The scene that follows, of course, is the Talbot transformation into the Wolfman. That took 3 days to shoot, and Chaney reported it was absolutely excruciating to have that very slow makeup application occur. Had to be very still. It's really kind of amazing. They had their own unit to do nothing but shoot the transformation in that way.
Yeah, because there's no help of CGI or anything like that. This is all done with prosthetic makeups, which takes forever. And everybody talks about it, but it's true. But Jim Carrey, when he did The Grinch, went through like Navy SEAL, I think it was Navy SEAL, like combat, like torture training in order to be able to sit under that much makeup for 14 hours or whatever, just because it was so claustrophobic and so time consuming.
Yeah.
And this is, long before like regulations for shooting days and stuff. So you're just stuck until they're done, basically. It was also Jack Pierce who did the makeup for this film, who did all the original Universal Monster movie makeup. So I like that they kept so much of the Universal Monster. I don't know, I guess now with like Marvel and stuff, we call it like a multiverse or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it stayed consistent for this film. They didn't just kind of use other things.
Well, even right down to the original score. was by, the name escapes me, by the individual who had done some of the original Universal music as well.
We also established during this that Wilbur has a love interest named Sandra, who is very out of his league, and Chick is very suspicious of her because he can't figure out why on earth Sandra would even speak to Wilbur. There's a lot. This film doesn't really stand the test of time for fat jokes, really.
No,
No, it's largely pretty problematic, which I never picked up on growing up in the 2000s because nothing was more problematic than the 2000s for body image. But watching it now, I was like, oh, okay, I might wait till my kid's older to show her this. Not because of the monsters, because of the fat jokes.
yeah,
And then McDougal, who is waiting the delivery, shows up in person and demands that his crates be delivered to his new museum. And he wants them delivered perfectly personally. He doesn't trust the shipment to be delivered otherwise, which is just kind of clearly there to push the plot forward. Chick and Wilbur are then delivering the crates after hours, and they open the first crate and discover Dracula's coffin.
yeah. That's a hysterical little sequence of moments with Costello reading the description of Dracula and the coffin opening in the background and the hand coming out. Yeah, it's just yeah, it's brilliant. And there's one of the places too where you see the really incredible work of Costello, just his reaction to seeing those things, his fear. I mean, it becomes, he's so good at that it becomes a feature almost of every Abbott and Costello movie. The point at which Costello will be afraid of something and he's unable to speak and he's calling for Abbott to come and rescue him and so on.
Where, like you're saying, Wilbur's reading the kind of the legend of Dracula, and as he reads it, the coffin creeps open, and then there's repeated callbacks to Chick to come and check it out. And then every time Chick comes back, Dracula, of course, has sealed the lid back down on
Yeah,
himself.
yeah.
It's very Scooby-Doo.
It is a little bit too, and the candle thing on the coffin. You're right. That's a very Scooby Doo kind of moment too. But they had used it in an earlier film, Catch That Ghost, and it obviously worked incredibly well in this one as well.
And eventually, Dracula kind of in this interim sneaks out of his coffin. But there's this little exchange that I like where Wilbur says, you know, that person that you said there was no such person? I think he's in there in person. I was reading this sign over here, Dracula's Legend, and all of a sudden I heard, and then he makes a creaking noise. Chick says, that's the wind. And Wilbur says, it should get oiled. So that's very much their style of dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the language humor that even as a kid, I found hysterical.
So Dracula sneaks out. Wilbur sees him. He's so frightened he can barely call for help. When Chick returns, he of course doesn't believe the story. Then they open up the second grate, and Chick goes to greet Mr. McDougal. Dracula hypnotizes Wilbur, finds Frankenstein's monster in the second crate, brings him to life, and they escape. And did you find through some of these moments that the film was able to build any sort of thriller, sort of horror, like we'll put in horror quotations because it's, of course, old movie horror, but like any sort of suspense at all for you? I mean, I had Tylenol 3s after surgery, so I was scared.
Maybe originally, but I've now seen it. It's one of the absolute go tos for me during October. I'm going to watch it every October. So I think probably at one point it's possible. At this point now, I'm anticipating the next laugh. So or doing the script in my head along with them. So I know not at this point did I find it, or at this watching did I find it scary or suspenseful in any way. But it's possible that originally I did.
Yeah, horror and comedy are kind of like that, where once you understand the beats, it's not as
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
not as scary. So then Mr. McDougal finds the crates are empty, assumes that he stole the contents from inside, and Wilbur and Chick are arrested. And then we kind of cut to like an old spooky castle, and Dr. Sandra Mornay welcomes Dracula and the monster to her island castle. And Sandra, this is a woman earlier that is with Wilbur. And so essentially we find out that the plan is that she was going to be seducing Wilbur to take his brain. And I just thought it was interesting. So much of this storyline made me think of Scooby-Doo, like the live action movie where they like need Scooby-Doo's pure heart, where like in this they need Wilbur's like thoughtless brain,
Yeah.
essentially.
Well, and that was the original title of the film as well, "The Brain of Frankenstein." But the studio didn't think that that people would understand what the film really was. It was part comedy, part horror film. It's Brain of Frankenstein just sounds like a horror film.
Very much so. And Wilbur and Chick are bailed out of jail. And once they get back to their apartment, Mr. Talbot, who I guess is thrown over from England in the interim, finds them and he stays across the hall from Wilbur and Chick, asking them to help him find Dracula and the monster. Chick doesn't believe him still. And then there's this little moment where we uh, see he leaves his suitcase and kind of forgets it. Wilbur goes to return it. He's already changed into the Wolfman, and Wilbur kind of narrowly escapes getting attacked. And this is more of the like slapsticky stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
Then we cut to Joan Raymond, who's an undercover insurance investigator who pretends to fall in love with Wilbur, hoping to gain information from him. Wilbur then invites this woman, Joan, to a masquerade ball for the evening that he was supposed to attend with Sandra. And now somehow Wilbur has 2 dates and Chick has no dates.
yeah. Yeah, and that always cracks me up too, and I'm not entirely sure why that Wilbur is the one or Costello is always the one in all the films that has the love interest. It is never Abbott.
Because he's nice and funny, and that's what girls want.
Is it? Okay. Well, there you go then.
Nice and funny.
Duly
That's all we
noted.
care. Abbott's always cranky.
It's true.
Talbot then confesses to him that he's the wolf man and kind of begs for their help. Wilbur, Chick, and Joan then go to Sandra's castle to pick her up for the ball. So they get to the castle to pick up Sandra. They kind of realize that they're in the house, or Mr. Talbot realizes that they're in the house of Dracula. The girls kind of go upstairs to get ready to each other, and this is sort of where everybody splits off. And this also made me feel like it was very Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. Yeah.
This entire
There's a couple of really interesting sequences in the castle on the first. As they're searching, there's the revolving wall where they, Chick discovers them, and again, it's that does Wilbur see them or doesn't he? Sort of bit. The other scene that I thought was really good was between Leos and Sandra, where he bites her on the neck. If you're watching, there's a mirror in behind them, and you can actually see, of course, Bela Lugosi playing Dracula, biting her neck, which we're not supposed to see now. So I don't know whether they just didn't think that bit through or they left it in intentionally. But I caught that on this last watching. I'd never noticed it before, and this time it was like, oh, I don't think I'm supposed to be able to see Dracula in this sequence.
definitely not. You're not supposed to be able to see the vampires in the mirrors. Yeah, there's a couple of the sequences I like is when Wilbur's going down to the basement and he sits on a chair that Frankenstein's already sitting in,
Yeah,
walking past Dracula's coffin. And yeah, the rotating wall was very Scooby-Doo. And then you just see this like same bit, like you see it in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade where Henry Sr. and Indy are like flipping around back and forth through the fire and the Nazis and trying to
yeah,
decide which is worse.
yeah,
But when Wilbur goes to get Chick, of course they're on the other side of the wall. And then Joan and Sandra, when they're off, just kind of discover each other's motives. Joan discovers that Dr. Frankenstein's notebook in Sandra's desk, and Sandra finds insurance investigating ID in Joan's purse. We then are introduced to Dracula as Dr. Lejos, and he introduces himself to Joan and the boys. There's also a professor that's working through this castle who has some questions about some specialized equipment that has arrived, but that kind of gets brushed under the rug. Sandra then feigns a headache and tells the others to go on to the ball without her. And then this is where we get to where Dracula bites her she doesn't want to go through the plan and he makes her. We then cut to the masquerade ball and Mr. Talbot's there and he accuses Leos of being Dracula, but no one takes him seriously. And there's just this little bit of dialogue. So Mr. Talbot says, "So we meet again, Count Dracula." Dracula says, "Dracula?" Wilbur says, "Yes, that's who he says you are." Dracula says, "Oh, my costume, perhaps." And Chick says, "No, Talbot, he thinks you're the real thing." Wilbur says, "Right out of Mr. McDougal's House of Horrors." Dracula says, "What an odd hallucination. But the human mind often inflamed with strange complexes. I suggest you consult your physician, Mr. Talbot." And then Chick grabs Wilbur and says, "Take him along with you, please." We then see Joan dancing with Dracula. So now Wilbur, with 2 dates, is now down to no dates pretty quickly. Sandra then lures Wilbur into the woods and attempts to bite him, but fails. And then they all kind of go looking for Joan because they're worried because now everyone has accepted that Dracula is in fact Dracula. And so they go looking for Joan, and Mr. Talbot becomes the Wolfman and attacks Mr. McDougal after failing to attack Wilbur, who thinks he's just Chick in his costume, which was just another element of kind of confusion. Since Chick's costume is also a wolf, Mr. McDougal then accuses Chick, who escapes and witnesses Dracula trying to hypnotize Wilbur. Chick is then also hypnotized and is then unable to do anything. And then Dracula brings Wilbur, Stevens, and Joan back to his castle. The next morning, Chick and Talbot kind of meet up and they decide to go and rescue everybody at this castle. Now they're on the same page, and Mr. Talbot is no longer the Wolfman.
Yeah,
But I thought this is very much like that kind of screwball comedy.
yeah, yeah. And really, from there to the end of the film is very much in that vein, with some great chasing going on through the castle, and yeah, it really becomes quite frantic from here on in.
Yeah, and quite fast once we get here. Like, I think this last chunk is maybe 15 or 20 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
Most of the film is like set up. We then cut to the castle where Wilbur is locked up. Dracula and Sandra are preparing to make the swap for Frankenstein's body. As Sandra prepares to cut into Wilbur's brain, Mr. Talbot and Chick burst in. Chick knocks out Sandra with a chair, and Talbot releases Wilbur but turns into the Wolfman again and then goes running after Dracula. Frankenstein monster breaks free of his bond because he's also tied up and throws Sandra out the window, which was pretty aggressive.
This interesting note about that. Of course, Sandra's on a wire, and the stunt didn't quite work, and she flew back in. It flew back into the main area and knocked Glenn Strange over, fracturing his ankle. So they had to reshoot it, but they had Chaney dress up in the monster costume and reshoot that sequence. And for a chunk of the next bit, he's in fact playing the monster.
I didn't know that. I knew that the stunt had failed. I didn't know that last bit.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's amazing. And I only recently discovered that. So yeah, uncredited, Chaney does have a portion of the monster role.
And then there's a chase, again, very Scooby-Doo, through the house between Chick, Wilbur, the monster, and face up between Dracula and the Wolfman. Dracula is transformed into a bat, but then like any dog, the Wolfman pounces on the bat, who then drags them both to their deaths. Chick and Wilbur escape in boats, and Joan and Stephen set the pier ablaze while the monster is standing on it, and the monster dies in flames. And then once they get in the boat, Wilbur has his kind of "I told you so" moment, and Chick kind of says, "Well, it's fine, like we're safe, they're all dead, we got nothing to fear now." And then the Invisible Man says, "Oh, that's too bad, I was hoping to join in on the excitement." And they both jump into the water and swim away, and the movie ends.
Yeah. And that's, of course, uncredited dialogue by Vincent Price.
Yes, and so the more old horror movies I watch with Vincent Price, the more I think that Scooby-Doo is entirely based on Vincent Price movies. Because House on Haunted Hill, I was like, this is very familiar.
Yeah.
There needs to be a cartoon dog here.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was, and of course, this movie then spawned a series of other Abbott and Costello versus, one monster or another, Jekyll and Hyde, the Mummy, the Killer Boris Karloff. So, and it was interesting that Karloff did do a promo for the movie, standing in front of the poster, but apparently his line was, I'll do the promo, but I don't want to see the movie.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. That was funny. But it was so good. I really like it. I think it's yeah, I really like it. I don't think it deserves such a bad rap that it gets. I don't know, I think too, like, maybe I mean, all old movie stars didn't know what was coming down the pipe for bad film. So, like
Yeah. Well, and I mean, there was a certain prestige in fairness to those that played the monster. I mean, I played one of them. There's a prestige to them. They were landmark. They're breaking new ground. And then to see any of that sort of status come off with a vehicle like this, I can appreciate that that might have been a little hard for them too, right?
well, that is this week's episode. Thanks for coming on, Dad, and for
A great pleasure.
joining me classic movie. And then next week, yeah, it's the very last episode of spooky season. And then we'll be back to regular movies with 1992's Dracula's next week.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Dad.
You bet.
Bye.
Bye bye.